to allow people to come on. But I want to tell you a story while we're waiting. And also, let me just ask you, if you can, find a piece of paper and a pencil. Oh, hello, Gillian.
Hi.
Find a piece of paper and a pencil so that you can write down some things, because I've got some ideas for you that I think will be helpful in allowing you to start to live anxiety free. But I'm going to just share a little story with you, first of all, while other people come on if they want to. I didn't expect to get many people on this time because the group's brand new, really. And the intention is to record this to make it available for people in Canada and America and all sorts of other places. If someone plays a violin, what is it that you hear? Well, or perhaps a different question. If someone plays a violin, are they creating music? Now, you'd say obviously yes. But actually, what are they creating? They're creating sound waves. And sound waves are not music. It gets turned into music when the sound wave hits your eardrum. Sound wave hits your eardrum, and then your brain interprets that sound wave as music. So actually, music is something that is interpreted in your brain. Now, I find this quite interesting, really, because if those of you who've followed me for a while, and I know you have, Gillian, we have an internal reality in a way that creates the experience we have. And once we understand this, we recognize that anxiety is also created in our internal reality. And therefore, anxiety is not something that we need to have. And that's the purpose of the anxiety coach community, really, to coach, guide, lead you through the necessary steps that we have to take to retrain our brain, to change our internal reality so we don't have to have anxiety. And in fact, we can have many less limits that we have. Because I often think of anxiety as wearing heavy diver's boots. So it's like you're wearing heavy boots and you're walking with heavy boots. And people often say to me, why am I so tired? Well, if you were walking with heavy diver's boots, it would be very tiring. And anxiety is like a brake on your life. It limits you. It makes everything harder than it needs to be. That is tiring. So if we want to live anxiety free, we have to do some things to release ourselves from the brake of anxiety. Okay. So I've got 10 points that I want to just take you through, which I think, from having worked with many hundreds of people as a coach, as a psychologist, these are essentials, really, and I want to just share them with you. So the first one is we have to recognize that anxiety is a problem to be solved, not something to be lived with. Now, a lot of times people live with anxiety. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times people have said, oh, I've been anxious, well, all my life. I've been anxious for 20 years, 30 years. What? I mean, all my life, right? So we live with it. But if you live with it, you're kind of reinforcing it and just accepting it as a part of life. And I'm here to say that you don't need to have anxiety. It's not necessary. But we have to create an intention not to be anxious in a sense. We have to create an intention to change what needs to be changed to stop this thing from happening. Because we're every day we're rehearsing our day. Every day we're doing the same things over and over again. And we've always got to do something different. Otherwise, we are going to get fundamentally the same outcomes. And that's what we're about, right? So if you've got a piece of paper, what I'd like you to do is, you can watch this again, of course, if there's like too much information, but write down 2 goals that you'd like to achieve and be specific. Now, an obvious one might be, I don't want to be anxious. Okay, that's obvious, right? But that's removing something. What might be a positive one, right? I don't want to be anxious, but I want to dance. I don't want to be anxious, but I want to travel, So write down a goal that you have, or 2 goals that you have. One might be removing something, one might be increasing something. Let me have a drink. Second point, don't get stuck on symptoms. Now, as a general principle, if I ate some shellfish and I was sick for 3 days, I would go, food poisoning, right? Consequence, sick. Cause, oysters or shellfish, right? Food poisoning, right? If I drink a lot of alcohol and I've got a hangover, I'll go, oh, headache, alcohol. Cause, consequence. If I eat a lot of food, I feel overweight. Cause, consequence. But we don't recognize this with anxiety so much. So symptoms, all symptoms are consequences. If you break your leg and you're in pain, you go, I'm in pain. Consequence, because I broke my leg, right? But it's very hard for people who struggle with anxiety. And when I say anxiety, I mean limits on life, feeling a fraud, feeling an imposter, don't feeling good enough. All of these things are sort of part of the anxiety cluster. It's very hard to recognize the cause of your anxiety. And only by dealing with the cause do we get rid of the consequences, do we get rid of the symptoms. Now, I know symptoms capture you. Symptoms are, you can't, it's very hard to ignore them. It's very hard to get past them. But what we do is we take that symptom and we make it more meaningful than it is. So if I have a broken leg and I feel pain, that pain isn't meaningful. It's just a consequence of having a broken leg. But when we have anxiety symptoms, we say, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do that. We give the symptoms more meaning than they need to have. And so we have to recognize the physiology, like what your body does, makes it feel meaningful, but it's not meaningful. And if you're always captured by symptoms, you're always going to get more symptoms, because what you fill your mind with is what you get. The more, whatever you focus your attention on is what you get. So don't get stuck on symptoms. But also, don't make excuses for anxiety. Well, I can't go out because there might be people I don't know. Well, I can't do that because it might not turn out very well. I can't fly because the plane might crash. I can't drive because I might have a panic attack. When you make excuses for anxiety, you're allowing anxiety to be in charge. And if we make excuses for anxiety, we're basically just sort of saying, I don't want to argue with you. And if we continue to make excuses for anxiety, then anxiety has no reason to go away. So we have to stop making excuses. So here's the thing, write down 2 excuses. If you struggle with anxiety, write down 2 excuses that you might commonly use to justify anxiety. Well, it's an excuse really, it's a justification. So if you can think of 2, write them down, because these form part of this process whereby we recognize the problem that we're dealing with, and then we're able to engineer it out of existence. Now, most of what we do is habit. It's mechanical. It's automatic pilot. It's automatic. And if we always do the habit, we always have the habit. Now, the thing about habits is that you don't need to think about it. And I think the best example really, well, I mean, your life is full of examples of habits, right? But you can drive a car and you don't even have to think about it. Talk about automatic pilot. I mean, it's hard to get, Tesla have managed it, but it's hard to get a car to drive. I mean, now it's not, but it's incredibly difficult to get a car to drive without a driver. We do it without even thinking. We're brilliant at it, but we do everything else without thinking as well. And we also have anxiety without thinking. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of self-limiting beliefs, a lot of low self-worth, a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of all of the things that we call as brakes and limiters on life are habits. Habits of thought, habits of physiology, actually, habits of emotion. So if you can, write down 2 anxiety-related things that you do that are automatic, that are kind of habitual. I don't go to the shops until they're really quiet because I might have a panic attack in a crowd. That's a habit, right? And it's disempowering. Now, if you want to predict your future, what do you do? So if I say, I'm going to Italy next week, what will it be like? Well, what I do is I look back at my memory and say, well, last time I went to Italy, what was it like? Oh, the security area was really busy. The airport was really, really busy. And I take that and I use that as a template for the future. Oh, it'll probably be really busy at the airport. So we are in the habit of using our past memories to kind of shape our future. But here's the problem, right? If your past is filled with memories of being anxious or limited or not feeling good enough, and you take that, well, if I have to go somewhere, or if I start a new job, or if I'm in a difficult situation, what will it be like? You take that past and you put it in the future, and then you're actually recreating the problem again and again and again. But what we need to do is to recognize that if you're working on yourself, your future can be different. And therefore, expecting the past and the future to be the same is basically adding to the problem. From this moment forward, give yourself the opportunity for change. So write down 2 ways that you'd want your future to be different. 2 ways that you'd change the future. 2 things you want to release yourself from that are habitual past things. Things which are, like, well, I never do that, but I'm going to do it now, right? So releases. You need to have an alternative to the problem. So if you're a big drinker and you want to stop drinking, you could just say, I'm going to stop drinking. Okay. It might work, right? But it probably won't work. So what you have to do is you have to have an alternative to the problem. So I'm a big drinker. I want to stop drinking. I know I'll drink alcohol free. Now we have an alternative. Because without an alternative, you're kind of like stuck with it. And so we need to have alternatives. We need to generate alternatives to the problem that you struggle with. So for instance, I can't talk to people in public. Okay, well, that's just the problem, right? So the alternative would be to try to talk to a few people, just something different. I can't go out to exercise because it's raining. Okay, we'll have an exercise regime in the house. Do something, generate an alternative and use that alternative so that you always have choice. Because when you have choice, you feel more in control, and that makes you feel calmer and more on top of things. So write down 1 alternative to anxiety that you have access to. Not something that you don't have access to, but something that you generally can do, Now, this next one is kind of interesting, really. We are a group of parts. We think of ourselves as a unified human being, but actually there are many parts of us, many bits of us, You've got a young part, you've got a parent part, you've got a worker part, you've got an adult male or female part, you have a romantic part, you have a perfectionist part, you have a low self-esteem part, or a failure or a fraud part. We've got all these parts. And a lot of times we I don't like that part. We push that. Oh, terrible things happened to me when I was a child. We push that away. Okay. Trouble is, it doesn't go away. It just causes problems in the background. So we've got to recognize that really there are no parts of you that need to have shame or embarrassment. There are no parts of you that are failure or fraud or imposter. These are just elements of your psyche. We need to open ourselves up to be all the parts that we are, because what we do is we create strategies that are really unhelpful. There's a part of me that feels like not good enough, right? So I become a perfectionist. So if I'm a perfectionist, I don't have to think about that part. Yeah, but being a perfectionist becomes the bigger problem. You know, I'm frightened of intimacy. You know, so I live on my own. Well, yeah, that causes a bigger problem. So a lot of times, our solution is bigger problem than the thing it's trying to fix, and that's almost always true with anxiety. So I'm gonna speak about OCD in a minute, but a lot of times people develop, if people have a childhood that's characterized by some uncertainty, or family disputes or breakup of marriages and everything, kids feel out of control, and they develop habits of control to be able to feel in control again. But then those habits just carry on, and the next thing you know, we're doing obsessions and compulsions, and that's a much bigger problem than the discord in the family of origin. So everything is working on yourself. You're with yourself 24/7, and you're always in the process of living and doing, So we need to look for opportunities and challenges. Well, look for opportunities to challenge and change the thing that we want to change. So it might be, I go to the shops, I don't talk to people. You go to the shops, you talk to people. You're always doing the opposite of what anxiety wants you to do. Anxiety wants you to do things because it's the emotion of fear, and the emotion of fear wants you not to talk to people, not to do anything different, not to push your comfort zone, ideally not go out the house, ideally stay in your bedroom, and fear wants you to do as little as possible because that's the only way you can stay safe. But we've got to push ourselves, otherwise we end up with a very small comfort zone that doesn't work for us. So find opportunities for challenge and change. So write down 2 things that you could do differently today. What would be 2 ways that you could challenge anxiety today? 2 ways you could push your comfort zone, stretch it out a little bit. So point number 9, we're getting there. Everything is in balance. But is it the balance you want? Your life is balanced, but is it the balance you want? So if you've had anxiety for a long time, or if you felt like a fraud or an imposter, or any kind of problem, like OCD, if you've had it for a long time, that's balance. The balance won't change unless the balance is forced to change. So if we use the idea of OCD, we have an obsession. The obsession makes us do a compulsion. We do the compulsion, the obsession is satisfied, balance. Likewise with anxiety. The anxiety doesn't want you to do anything, or doesn't want me to do anything specific. I don't do anything specific, so balance, okay? But we have to deliberately upset that balance. And what happens is we upset the balance. So, for instance, we reduce the power of the obsession. The need to do the compulsion goes down. Eventually, as we keep doing that, the compulsion stops, the obsession diminishes, we get a new balance. And miraculously, what happens is, when you have a new balance that works for you, you forget to have a problem. Because a balance that works doesn't have the problem in it. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't tell you the number of people who have had very, very serious problems, all sorts of things. And they say, yeah, I forgot to have a problem, which is quite interesting, really. So we want to perturb the balance. So can you think about what your new balance might look like? Like, write down how you want your new balance to look. It's like a goal in a sense, right? And finally, everybody has more potential than they recognize. That's why these, TV shows that get people on desert islands or surviving stuff, or they're fantastic. People could do more stuff than they think they can. But if you're limited by anxiety or low self-esteem, or you're trapped by symptoms, you're always underplaying what you can do. Now, the thing is, very few people actually get to experience as much as they're capable of. Because it takes a lot of effort, right? You could be an Olympic runner, right? That's a lot of effort. But, we can experience a lot more and give ourselves a much more rich and varied and interesting life experience, by allowing ourselves to be amazed by what we can do. So why don't you write down one thing that releasing yourself from anxiety will allow you to do? One thing that you could aspire to. Something that would be interesting, life enriching. I'm a great believer. I'm a great fan of enriching your life, investing in your life. So what would something that you could amaze yourself be? Okay. So those are the 10 points on how to live without anxiety. They're developed from having talked to hundreds and hundreds of people over the years. And I know this sounds simple, but really, if we kind of like think of them as a whole, then it's kind of like developing a new attitude, a new relationship to anxiety, where anxiety is a thing and I'm dealing with it. I'm working on it. I'm doing something with it. It's not me. It's just a problem that I have and I'm trying to solve. So I hope that was interesting. I'll make the video available so you can look back through it. And now the things that you've written down, of course, become a roadmap, don't they? And we can follow that roadmap and we can kind of measure ourselves against it so that we can recognize the stages of progress as we go through. And I think that's really important. Okay, so I will stop the video there if that's okay. As if anyone has any comments or anything else, please just put them into the community, and we'll be able to talk about it as it's released to more people when they get up and they're in Canada and America and all sorts of other places. So thanks for participating.